one speaker, but I think it's fine. Yeah, that is what. So, hello everyone. Being mindful of time, I'm going to start the session now. I'm Kristina Olausson. I'm Public Policy Manager with Etno, the telecommunications network operators. I'm very happy to be here today, and thanks for coming to the session on innovation and regulation and how to create the right building blocks for 5G networks. We picked this as an example for the case of balancing innovation and regulation, because there is currently a lot of talk about innovation in this area and the rollout of 5G networks, which have the promise of bringing high capacity, new speeds, lower latencies, and perhaps many interesting use cases to come. And today with me, I have a panel with Thomas Kolb, Senior Expert on Regulatory Strategy at Deutsche Telekom. Thanks for being here. I have also Ola Bergström, representing the public sector, as Director for International Affairs at the Swedish Post and Telecom Authority, PTS, and Hanane Bujimi, who's the Executive Director of Tech Policy Tank. We might also have a fourth speaker coming today, but we're still waiting unless Jan van Alphen has arrived in the room. Okay, thanks. Good, great. Jan, do you want to jump over here or you want to sit over there? Okay. Maybe it's helpful if you want to come over to this side so we can all be gathered here. Great. So we will kick off this discussion with a presentation from Thomas on a new use case from Deutsche Telekom. Please go ahead. Thanks.
Is this working? Yes, thanks, Christina. I have some slides on 5G. Okay, so I just... Excellent, wonderful, thank you. So, I don't think I'll use the whole 15 minutes that have been allotted to me. This slide is basically just a recap of what is there to expect. We've already heard everything is becoming faster, more performant, lower latencies, and also a lot more connections. That's the promise. Now, what does this actually mean for the users? What can we expect? So usually you have three broad categories of use cases. The one is, of course, the bandwidth-centric and probably the closest to the consumer. The critical communication down in the right corner is more the one that is dependent on low latency, high reliability, and there the use cases are more in the industrial domain. And then the third one, and that's probably the one that is already most noticeable today, is the massive machine communication that has started with narrowband IoT on the current generation of networks. There we just expect a whole lot of more devices to be connecting in parallel, which of course puts a heavy load on the networks, and everybody is expecting that with 5Gs this can also be optimized. Now for today, I think this slide here is the most important one. As you know, 5G is not yet fully deployed, so talking about a concrete 5G use case is a bit of a challenge today. That's why I chose the campus network example, because this is actually being trialed right now. It can be realized on the current generation of networks also. For the time being, you can imagine this as a parallel network, which is either logically or physically separated from the public network. So what does this mean? Well, I'm not an engineer, I'm an economist, so I'll try to explain in the terms that I understand myself. You can either use the same spectrum and reserve capacity on that spectrum for the private network and keep them logically separated, or you can use dedicated frequencies, and as you have probably seen in the German 5G auction, there has been quite a large chunk of 100 megahertz reserved exactly for this purpose, and those 100 megahertz will not be attributed to the telecom operators, but can be attributed to industry directly. So one use case would be that industrial partners come to us with the frequency rights they have and we implement them for them. Or, of course, they can also do it all on their own as they choose to do so. And this will eventually phase into the full 5G deployment scenario where everything can be realized, in our case, on the 5G network. So what currently is completely separated will be in a network slicing architecture, just another slice on the network. Now, how does this actually look? Also in a very stylized form. We would, of course, assume that we already have coverage wherever we go to build these campus networks. We will then build additional capacity, which both benefits the existing public network, but will also provide the capacity that is necessary for the industrial partner and user. And what are they going to do on this private network? Well, the current most demanded use cases that we see is the steering of industrial production. It has also the possibility to do predictive maintenance, to do the monitoring, to even do maintenance supported by augmented reality. What is most important is that the idea of the campus network is that since it's separated, it will not be traditional telecommunication services, but really what currently maybe would be realized on a Wi-Fi in-house infrastructure can now be done on a mobile network spectrum. And what is expected is that this will perform more reliable and faster also than the current Wi-Fi technology allows, which is in demand by the industry. So in this first phase, I would say 5G is not really going to be a consumer technology, but we'll see the first applications, for example, in this campus deployment with industrial partners. So as I've said, this is now being tested. We have it live at 3 sites currently, and the big question from a regulatory point of view, of course, is this going to interfere with the public service that we are providing? And that is a burden of proof on us. We have been working with the regulator in Germany in testing the concept, but also in assuring that we do the measurements first ourselves, but we also let them, of course, measure the actual performance, with the idea being that we can demonstrate that the coverage, the public coverage, will actually improve by the existence of campus networks. So far, the first results are positive, and also in the discussion with my specific peers, and I have to say I'm a net neutrality expert, and that's how I'm involved in this topic, because internally the project leads come to me and ask me, are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to do that? Or is there maybe a problem with net neutrality? Well, as long as the two premises that I just cited are actually true, so we have separated networks and the performance of the public network is not going down by the existence of a private network in parallel, they are fine with that. Of course, the proof is in the pudding, and we have to make sure that we actually deliver what we have promised here. If we do, I have 3 theses that we can test in the debate that is to follow, saying consumers and verticals will benefit from what's happening here, and there is no need for preemptive regulatory protection. Along the same lines, more differentiation is not a problem, but in fact will increase competition, especially between networks, as of course there will be differences in what performance can be delivered. And last but not least, what I just alluded to towards the end of the previous slide, if done correctly, there will be more traffic management, but it can be absolutely compliant with net neutrality rules. So, unless there's any questions, that is my first input presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Thomas. So we will have a short presentation by Jan as well. And as I didn't say that before, Jan is ICT Strategy Advisor and Board Member of EuroDIG, which is the International Telecommunications User Group. Please, Jan, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jan van Alphen. You already introduced me. I'm a board member of INTAC, the International Telecommunication User Group. The INTAC was established in 1974, and it has a permanent observer status as ITU, and has an expert user group status at OECD. We are representing around 3,000 large, medium, and small companies worldwide, and we have a close relationship with our sister organizations, for instance, like Belgium, Belgium, BTG the Netherlands, Australia, and other associations. And we often have meetings and discuss themes, and 5G is one of them, of course, because it's very actual. BTG is Dutch associations for representing 200 business consumer companies with focus on ICT and telecommunication. We are the longest existing one in the Netherlands, over 30 years, first focused on telecom and later on ICT. When we look at the topic of 5G, we discussed there are several issues we have to think over. One of them is infrastructure and capacity, and we acknowledge that there is a need for high density, and that will be have an implication that the implementation will be difficult. And for that reason, we also have to think over of solutions of remote management, and we must try to avoid an overlapping in infrastructure. As business consumers, we think it's very important to work on complementary technologies to extend the scope and to create a complete end-to-end environment. That's very important. For instance, I'm working at a university hospital in the Netherlands too. We are closely related to the university, and it's important to work on an infrastructure based on several techniques that work seamlessly together. For that reason, it's also important to work on full coverage, and the expectations are high from 5G. We think it's very vital for the continuity of our business processes, especially when we are working in the mission-critical business processes. I'm working in healthcare, but we also have members working for the airport, the harbor industry, the railways, etc. And for that reason, it is important to create an environment that full continuity can be achieved. We also work a lot in multi-user environments. I just explained that I'm working at the University Hospital in Utrecht, and we're closely related to the university. And then it will be very inconvenient if we all can use the same infrastructure, and the techniques based on that infrastructure can be used seamlessly. There's still a lot of problems with the in-building coverage based on the existing techniques, 3G, 4G. And we are working in the Netherlands, for instance, on a standard together with the MNO for the distributed antenna systems. When we continue with 5G, the infrastructure will be more complex, and for that reason we had to discuss this topic in advance. It's very important, otherwise there will be as business consumers, it's very difficult to create solutions without help from the MNOs or RCT suppliers that are related to us. There's also a bit concern by our consumers that there will be health concerns related to 5G. There are some reports already existing, and there is no direct relation proved, but it's especially when you're working in healthcare or in home care, people are afraid of these topics. So we have to be aware of that. When we focus on rollout, it's of course important to focus on maximum speed, but more important, we think it's important to increase the capacity for real-time communication. That's the main point. For that reason, it's also important to work on low latency and high reliability and resilience. And in the ideal situation, I just explained, we like to work on a converted ecosystem where all the underlying techniques will work seamlessly. But we know we still have a long way to go. When I think I went a little bit too far. Oh, there's auctions, yes. When we focus on auctions, we think important in that the auctions should not burden the market. We must and the development and the innovation. So it's not. We don't want to have a delay, too much delay of national because of due of national or international discussions, and we have to work on affordable prices and cost transparency. Our customers are willing to pay extra for full continuous service. So maybe that creates chances for to have new business cases with full rendement, also for the MNOs that have to pay a lot for the new auctions. The spectrum allocation is also important, and we have we must focus, of course, on a fast rollout, and not only on the benefits of revenues. For that reason, we think an environment of full competition is necessary, and for that reason, we also have to think about spectrum sharing and trading in spectrum also afterwards the auctions. And it's very important that we don't create new vendor lock-ins, especially not on switching from provider to provider. As business consumer, we use a lot of different MNOs, and it's a difficulty when you want to switch from provider to provider. And of course, very important, we have to focus on the outlying areas. There are still problems. I just went to a symposium for home care yesterday, and there was an area near Germany, and still there are problems with the outlying areas and the coverage within the outlying areas. There are in Sweden good examples for how to solve these kinds of problems. For instance, with social mast, and we have to work on that too. In fact, in general, we think it's very important to work on in a global approach and to work on international guidelines. That will be the basis for us to realize the full digital transformation we need. And we have to learn from earlier experience, for instance, the roaming discussion about the tariffs and between the countries. It took a long time, much too long, and we need more speed to realize this topic too. For that reason, it's still important to work on a certain network neutrality and zero rating. We have to work on harmonization on international standards, and we have to invest in knowledge and time to experience, and because there are a lot of good use cases already and proof of concepts going on, but there are still industries who are having difficulties to find and to define good new use cases. And for that reason, we think it's important to collaborate with the MNOs and the ICT suppliers that are involved. And for that reason, we also think that there is a need of limitation of legislations. These are our thoughts about this topic yet.
Okay, thank you so much, Jan. Please welcome back to the table, and we can start the discussions. Thank you. So before we get going, I just want to say this is a panel discussion, but I don't want to divide it in a typical discussion and then Q&A. So I would really welcome from the audience, if you have questions, please just raise your hand whenever you want, and we will take them, we will integrate you in the discussions directly. Yes.
Just one quick question. Those reports on health, could you name one or two of them so I can write down and find them?
So I'll just repeat that for the stream, that was a question about the reports Jan mentioned on health, and we'll have a chance to give some information on that later. Thank you. And also, we have a few loose microphones, so if you want to speak, we can try to send them around the room. We'll have to help each other out because it's a large room, but thank you very much. So maybe I can start building on a bit a question on the use cases we discussed. A question for Jan. You say, yeah, you work at Utrecht University Hospital and look at different use cases when it comes to new networks and technology there. Is there anything you see in the near future where the capabilities of networks such as 5G would help you in your work, where you think it would be a case to integrate in your work?
Yes, the position of the hospitals are changing. We are more working on based on region-related services. For that reason, we need a high speed and a high data capacity. And I think there are a lot of solutions that we can create through 5G, for, healthcare on this distance, and the broker functionalities between the hospitals and the patients. And the security maybe is also an issue, but we think that there are a lot of possibilities with 5G, but we have difficulties to define them.
Mm-hmm. And so for me as a patient, when in the future can I expect to, for example, have a doctor's appointment in my home, or when would it be possible for me to have be in a hospital but having a doctor completing a surgery in another space? Is that something we can expect in the next 5 years? Or
I hope so, but it depends on how fast the Netherlands is rolling out. So we have an auction at the beginning of next year, and then we have to start. And well, it will be a good opportunity if we are facilitated by doing some projects already, testing. And for example, in Groningen, there's a program going on, and UMC Groningen, our neighbor hospital in the north of Netherlands, is already doing some tests with 5G related to emergency cases and help.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And since you mentioned spectrum, I'll jump on that question right away. So This session is supposed to be about the interplay between regulation and innovation, and of course an important regulatory framework when it comes to telecommunications networks was the European Electronic Communications Code that was adopted recently. And among other things, spectrum management are addressed there. Also would like to just note to you, a topic we wanted to raise today was how we can achieve the gigabit society goals. That is about achieving 100 megabits per second connections by 2025 across all Europe. And in this communication by the Commission from 2016, something they noted on 5G rollout was that it will require early exploitation of EU harmonized radio spectrum. We see now currently in Europe a lot of spectrum auctions and authorization and awards going on, and I would like to ask the panel a bit what your views are on the latest development. We just heard that the German spectrum auction was closed, so perhaps we can have a comment from Thomas there. I'm sure you were following that. It brought in 6.6 billion euros. Similarly, in Italy, it also landed around a similar level, 6.5 billions. These are quite large amount of money. Whereas, just for your comparison, in Finland, it was 77.6 million euros, so a little bit less. So maybe could I have a comment from Thomas and maybe Ola on that one?
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, Germany was a very peculiar case, and we cannot really be happy with the outcome because it cost us a lot more money than we expected. It also took longer than expected, and you also probably heard that all the involved companies have started legal procedures against the auction and the attribution. So yes, it is finished, but it's rather uncertain what will happen in those legal procedures. So we cannot immediately start rolling out, I'm afraid. And having said so, the money that will be spent on that goes to the government, and the government has some plans on what to do with it, but it will not directly benefit mobile. So this is, in fact, money that will be missing for the rollout of 5G. And last but not least, there is a lot of obligations connected to those licenses, but there is not much support when it comes to actually building the additional sites that will be required. So what I mean by that is we already today have difficulties in some places to get the approval to build additional sites, and we will require a lot of more sites for the 5G rollout, so that also will be a problem. And now the most recent development announced by the ruling parties is that there will actually be a state-owned infrastructure company in Germany, and having chosen a competitive market approach, this doesn't seem to be very coherent. It would be good if they could build mobile sites where then existing license holders for 5G spectrum could put up their sites. But if that's going to happen or not, we shall see.
Yes, I think with the new code now, I think we made some improvements. I think the work done now in RSPG, especially on these peer review system they have in place, will bring some benefits. That said, I think the situation we have in Europe on spectrum with the strong national approach is problematic, and we clearly see in many member states a huge effect on national issues coming up. I mean, we saw in Sweden now we had a delay for almost 2 years from a purely national issue on the 700 band. And of course, the cost of spectrum is as well quite problematic, and we do what we can to bring those costs down when we have auctions. But that's a problem that from an investment perspective, that member states have the possibility to have that decision on their own, of course. And we know that connected to we will discuss that more on the Gigabit Society. We know that there will be needed a lot of money to have every citizen connected, and it's problematic when we take a lot of money out of the sector in this way.
Great, thank you so much. So we hear here from the user side and the providers that there's a lot of expectations, but there are certain hurdles on the way. But I would also like to ask Hanane Buyimi from the civil society side a bit what your views are and your expectations on the benefits and challenges of these new networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we're all connected to the internet, and we all feel like the need of speed, and that's what 5G promises is like. The internet will be a lot faster, but that comes with more challenging issues like the spectrum allocation and having the necessary infrastructure to deploy emerging technologies. I think, any new technology comes with a lot of promises, but we never know the extent to which it affects policy. And I think we had a brief conversation about this before the session, and how tech companies, they rush into adopting and deploying new business models because the aim is eventually making money in the long run. But what's lacking actually is combining the two worlds, the technology world with the policy work. Because what happens usually, we all get excited, and then suddenly we find ourselves facing few challenges and how this emerging technology is going to impact life in general. So we value the service delivery, and that includes speed, and now 5G promises to connect every single device, that exists on the surface of Earth, which is going to be a little bit more challenging when it comes to absorbing information. So we'll have a lot of content generated due to the connectivity speed, and also due to the frequency of it. So our lives will have like a parallel level, of the virtual life on a daily basis, and every minute. So that will definitely pose a lot of challenges when it comes to how we want our life, to evolve in the future. So do you want a technology that is more maybe human-centric, where we're not only exchanging information and data with devices, because then life will become really challenging. Now, the promise of 5G, when it's fully deployed, in the next maybe 10 years, we will know the impacts, because the trick with technology is that we never, ever understand the full extent to which it's going to impact life until, it's done. It's like the problem with Facebook now. We talk about it as, the evil of the tech industry, but when it was founded, I think there wasn't that agenda there. So the same applies on 5G or any other emerging technology. We have to keep certain, benchmarks in check to be able to understand the impacts of these emerging technologies on life in general. And that's why I strongly, supported this course between, the telecom world and the policy world, which happened, to combine in EuroDIG, because we don't see, the business sector present in this kind of fora, because I can imagine that most of you even question what interests, people in the telecom kind of market, discussion. But I can assure you that there are a lot of issues that maybe this conversation will ponder upon, and that is, discussing, the security hindrances, the privacy issues that comes with deploying, technology like 5G, the consumerism, increasing capitalism kind of perspective of how products are managed, distributed, shared, and so on. So, we promote, of course, the service, because in the end, you're a business model that supports, expanding in terms of, market acquisition. But I think we need to keep the policy discussion in check to be able to understand the impact to which it actually influences our decisions as human beings.
Okay, thank you very much. So I hope to dig a bit deeper into, of course, how we can improve that discussion also later. But maybe just now it would be interesting to hear your views. We're talking about a bit of problem maybe of the chicken and the egg. What comes first? Is it that the supply drives the demand, or is it demand that drives development of certain use cases? And you say that, of course, there are a lot of benefits with this new technology, and it would be interesting to hear your views, having seen the type of use cases that Thomas and Jan spoke about. Do you think these type of early use cases can stimulate further demand among user groups, and would, of course, open that question also to the industry representatives? Thank you.
No, I think from what I've seen, in the health sector mainly, I think, there's a huge potential, of this kind of technology to magnify, the impact of the internet, because now we're talking about two things. So we have definitely the telecom world marrying into the content industry, which was, I think, it's a piece of market that escaped the telecom operators, and it's being handled now by OTT, providers. But now I think with 5G, we are probably going to expect the marriage between the two worlds, where we see the telecom industry tapping into the markets in a more lucrative way. I think 5G will definitely help foster and magnify other emerging technologies like AI, which I believe can be, of significant help to the health sector, because beyond actually being able to talk to your GP, via an app, which already exists, by the way, like in the UK now, you can get a consultation from your GP through an application, because the health sector in the UK is so saturated that there is no possibility anymore to get a consultation physically. And I think with the help of learning machine, which will be powered eventually by 5G, you can get more customized advice based on data that is generated previously through the records and so on. So I see how this could be beneficial even for scientific research, because at the moment there is some kind of difficulty populating, data in a way that you can make sense of it. So I'm sure you hear a lot about the importance of data analysis, and data is the new oil and whatnot. But the thing is, we reached a point where we need to make sense of this data and see how it can help us in improving, specific scenarios. It could be in the health system, but it could be also in disaster management and a lot of, other industries. And I think, that's why there is a need of speed that I spoke about. Now we can know that information, but a lot faster, and it will help us probably advance. But I can't help but looking at the other side of the coin, and this is what we have to kind of keep in mind as a community that involves a lot of people who want to make a little bit of money, but people who are concerned as well with the impact, of such technology. If we are able to conceive, new technologies in a way that help us imagine what the challenge is, so we can include it in the design phase. Because what happens is that you see the industry divided into a lot of silos. So the telecoms and the manufacturers and the regulators, they all swim in their own kind of pool. But what we need to see is more convergence. So we need to see all these people in one room and trying to design the future together. And then that's how we can actually tap into the potential of a new technology, but also be aware of the limitations that can pose in the long run. Obviously, we will never be able to know everything ahead, because even in terms of regulation, I know that the new regulatory framework, for example, in Europe is trying to be ahead of the curve, but sometimes the kind of regulation we need is incremental, it's robust, it's more kind of keeping in check what could happen, because you cannot regulate software, because you never know how it's going to behave. Nobody knows. Even the people who actually invent new tools, they really cannot possibly understand how it's going to impact life, and people. And that's why we are facing a lot of issues now with data and privacy and surveillance and so on. So the reason why I keep insisting on engaging, and merging these words together is because it's important to understand, how we can build a better future where we actually can all co-live without major issues like the ones we have now. Because at the moment, we are having this policy discourse for a number of years, but today we heard the EU Commissioner saying, finally, IG is highly featured in the political agenda of European leaders, because they understood the value of having a policy discourse while deploying, emerging technologies, not because we want to regulate, but because we want to have the ability to make an informed decision on what could work and what wouldn't work. So over-regulating is definitely an issue. So, but I know that regulation also triggers trust in a specific market, and it's what basically telecom operators would like to have in place, because then it's a guarantee they can do business. But I'm saying it's a little bit more than that. We need to be more inclusive.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks so much. I think what you're essentially what you're talking about here is the vertical integration of different sectors, as we see the potential of with 5G, also as we saw in Thomas' presentation earlier. And maybe we could just have a quick comment from Thomas there on what this means for you. Sorry.
Thanks. I think the industry is changing, the telco industry, that is. I mean, with the 5G example, only a couple of years ago, the prevalent recognition was, well, we will have new services, we will have new revenues, it's going to be exciting and great for us. We have become a little bit more realistic, I think, in the last 5 years, and now we don't actually see a lot of revenue potential here, additional revenue, but a way to run and operate our networks more efficiently, which means giving the capacity that is needed to the ones that need it in real time. And I also see, or we have seen, this integration of content, especially in the United States, but also in Europe. But I think that trend is already reversing, because inherently there is not a lot of synergy between providing network transport services and having content rights. At least Deutsche Telekom doesn't bank very much on the content side. We see ourselves as a service provider, not as a content producer or owner. Having said that, I think the future will indeed, and that fits well with the EuroDIG motto this year, see a lot more partnerships and cooperation models, because we need to provide what is actually demanded by industrial partners, and also the possibility of, for example, software-defined networks opens up new ways to increase efficiency, and it will not be as in the old days that the operator defines the offer and the consumer can take it or leave it. It will be a lot more interactive and dynamic. Of course, that will also raise some regulatory questions. I mean, I would hope that at the end of the day, we still retain the control we need to assure that those networks operate safely and efficiently, which means that not everybody can configure everything how he likes it, but at least there will be a menu that is increased from what we have known in the past, and there will be more options that better fit customer needs. And I'm pretty sure that this will be also the discussions that we will have in the future years. What are those interfaces? What control points need to remain with the network, and which ones should go to the edge?
Thank you. And maybe from the regulator's side, how do you view your role in this changing environment that Hanane and Thomas described of vertical integration of different sectors, but also new technologies such as the software-defined networks? How do you view that development and your role as regulator?
I think that's actually quite a huge shift now for regulators. It's been fairly easy, is maybe the wrong word to say, but it's fairly straightforward before. I mean, we knew what to regulate. We spent a lot of time with operators. We had state-owned monopolies basically trying to have more competition on the market. But I think now especially with 5G, the trend is now that regulators are becoming much more sort of a promoter of investment as well. So we need to have that balance. I mean, we have a lot of tasks from our ministries on how to promote the gigabit society, how to promote the innovation, and so on. And on the other hand, I mean, we see the huge number of new stakeholders we are meeting, and from a regulator's perspective, I mean, we're quite used to meet with vendors and operators, but how do we reach out to other stakeholders, like the tech industry in particular? I mean, we meet with some of the big companies, of course, but how do we reach out to the whole tech industry? So that I think is the main challenge. And also we see now that we are sort of involved in much more regulation than before. Before there was sort of competition regulation, maybe some consumer regulation, but now we see areas like cybersecurity, which is very problematic. And it's so important that the regulators get this balance right, because we need to be very open on sort of how we see the future of regulation of course, for different scenarios, because we have not the picture of exactly how the market will be developed, but we need to be very open how we see different scenarios and how we could possibly see how regulation will play a role in that. But it's an important task for regulators ahead, I think.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll just say also to the audience, please feel free to raise any questions you have. Yeah, so we have one from the lady, and I think you have a microphone even there. Okay, great. Fire away.
I'm lacking the discussion about the environment and sustainability in this area a lot. And I'm thinking of, you say, I mean, actually, is there any studies, like control studies, on the effect, on impact on health due to being exposed for 5G or the antenna of the masts, so to speak? Is there any studies? I want to see them.
There is a lot of studies. Well, I'm not the expert for the health issues. I just know that it's discussed, controversial, but from a scientific point of view, so far it has not been demonstrated that there actually is harm. Of course, with scientific test theory, it's very difficult to prove that there will be no harm in the long term, but at least we do not have an indication that there is an immediate harm. Otherwise, we couldn't roll out this technology, of course.
What is the difference between 4G and the 5 generation?
Well, as I've said, I'm an economist and not an engineer, but what I have understood is
Does anyone know?
Yes, of course. The technicians will be able to explain this to you in much more detail, but let me try what I've understood is especially this technology of beamforming, which means in the past, up to 4G, you can imagine you have a mast and you install antennas and sectors, and they send like an electronic field in one direction, and it has basically the same strength going out. And with this beamforming, it will be much more pinpoint. You can localize the device, and you will send the information that is destined for a specific device more condensed. Now, what the exact effects on health are of this change, I'm the wrong person to ask.
Because I think that's something we really need to consider here. I've heard that 5G is much more stronger in the radiation. It actually impacts the cells of us, and we warms up. It's like a microwave oven. And people who are living in these areas, they don't know that they are exposed. And I think that is against the democracy rules, that we have to have a regulation on that. You say that we have a regulation on cyber security. That's very cute, maybe. And we also need to think about people's health. And I think that's very, very important. And I like to see those studies because I don't think there are. And I wonder, because I don't know the name of the gentleman to the right there.
Yeah.
But he says that people are afraid that works in hospitals, and we should be aware about that. But how? How should we be aware about that, and why?
So, sorry, your last question was, could you just repeat it again, please?
What is his name?
For it's a question for Jan. Yeah.
Jan, exactly. In his speech, he said that people are aware or afraid, working in hospitals, they are afraid of this technology, and we need to be aware about that. What does he mean with that?
That the way people experience the healthcare and the healthy healthcare, that it can depend on the they experience the services. And for instance, we have a special department who's working all the time, looking, doing study on interferential, that kind of aspects. So we try, and we rely on national healthcare research, and we are in dialogue, and there's even a special association focused on these topics. So if there are any comments about our patients, then we do the research, and we try to make it realistic for them, to show them the facts and the way our hospitals are dealing with that. And there are some studies done yet in the Netherlands, and we continue those studies.
That's nice. Where can you get those studies?
Yeah, I was just looking up
Okay,
for you because I just read some reports, but I can deliver that later.
It's also, I just have the last question to the woman here, and that is due to that you said that it's not we cannot regulate like the algorithms. We in Sweden, I'm from the Lightnet Foundation, we have created a due diligence process for AI, and I'm not so focused on the radiation and 5G, but I'm very interested in that. But what we want is actually, if we do something in the AI area that is actually wrong, we need to have we can call it like an erasability, that we can actually erase. I'm thinking about all those satellites that is up in the area right now, connected to the 5G and the masts. If we don't want them, and if we see that the bees and the nature are really affected, and we don't have food, what do we do if we can't erase them? So I think it's very, very important to think before right now, because this is, it's not like chemicals, it is, but there's more energy into this that kind of have a really, really negative impact on the world. So.
No, I think I know exactly what you would like to hear, from the panel about, the risks of deploying 5G on health and the impacts. But if you recall, we've heard this conversation many times when the initial infrastructure for mobile was being spread all around. We heard the same stories. When mobile became mainstream, we heard the same concerns about the impacts, you know, of radiation and using mobiles and so on. I had the opportunity to be moderating a workshop with GSMA, which is the Association of, you know, GSM operators, and one of the questions that, you know, the policy people at GSMA wanted to be trained on is how to answer this. But there is no scientific research, as the gentleman said, to prove, you know, the impacts of 5G, you know, networks on health. And I think somebody should invest in that to demystify the myth. I just wanted to stress the fact that specific question comes up with deploying any new technology, but nothing is proven yet. It's just creating a little bit of noise by a bunch of people. I understand that. Now, when it comes to the impact assessment, because you said, oh, we have to be in a position to track back. I understand that, but what I said actually is we cannot fully understand the impacts of the software or algorithms that are in place, because you design them to perform a very specific function, but then they end up doing something completely different in reality. And that's what we can't regulate. Now, having the opportunity to track back is obviously, you know, it's a possibility. And that's why I said it's also good to have a fluid, you know, framework, legal or regulatory framework that we can use to be in a position to make tweaks and changes so we can be more in line with the need in place. All what we do here is trying to kind of think how we could do something better, but nobody knows the ultimate, you know, solution. What we know is that there is a business opportunity and there's a lot of investments in deploying this kind of technology, but what we need to be aware of is how to set the guidelines to perform impact assessment that will not hinder innovation, because this is one of the major, you know, discussions that we have in different fora about how regulation shouldn't stifle innovation, and the way to do it is to be more incremental about it. But obviously, we cannot always keep thinking about the negative. We need to talk about the two levels. We need to have a conversation on a level where technology, you know, wizards are on the same page with the policy people. And then when we have an outcome, it's concrete and it's plausible. But there are a lot of theories about, you know, the impacts of 5G on health, which are not, you know, confirmed. And I'm not defending the technology. I'm just trying to be more pragmatic and realistic about what we're trying to do here.
I just, my opinion is that we need to see the, as I say, the security principle, that we follow a security principle instead of just being an anarchy and just putting the technology and then don't know the consequences. That's very strange that we actually do that. So I was thinking about the DuPont and the Teflon market. There's not any. When they have done research on people's blood all over the world, they don't find any people who don't have Teflon in their blood. That's a specific thing. So so maybe we should be more aware this time. I mean, on these effects. Mm. Yes.
Thank you. So we have first a comment from Deutsche Telekom here, and then we have 3 questions from the floor from the gentlemen here around the table. So.
Just a very last and quick comment on the health issues and some food for thought maybe. The scenario where your handheld device emits the highest amount of power is actually the one when you are far away from an antenna. So I think a common misperception is that in this 5G scenario where we have to expect a lot more antennas, that this will create the health problem. It might actually do the contrary, as your distance from the next antenna will diminish in the near future. So maybe that could also be comforting a bit. And I can assure you that the government wouldn't attribute licenses if the government thought that the technology was as unsafe or unstable for the time being. I mean, this has been tested.
Okay.
They are actually measuring electromagnetic field, but not the microwave. So
Yeah, thanks. It definitely seems to be a topic for more discussion to come. But first, I had 3 questions here in this order. Gentleman over here, in purple, and Jonathan. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Feyo Sikkinga. I'm a regulatory expert with Bird & Bird. Thomas and Jan, thank you for your interesting presentations. You both mentioned net neutrality as being an important topic in the context of 5G. One could say that a strict interpretation on the concept of the prohibition for tariff differentiation, zero-based rating, and tariff prioritization could potentially be a hindrance of a successful exploitation of 5G-based services. I was wondering whether, what are your views on the need to recalibrate the concept of net neutrality in terms of the rollout of 5G?
Thomas, Jan, who would like to start? Jan? Yeah, please grab the microphone there.
Well, I said a certain net neutrality because I understand that the world is changing and it's difficult to define which kind of net neutrality. But I think it will stimulate the innovation development first. So and I also said that our customers are willing to pay for extra services. So if they have the guarantee that they have the service they want and they are guaranteed delivered, then maybe it's time to change the model a bit.
I consider that a yes.
I think the European approach we have is a workable one as long as regulators act pragmatically. And having said that, I actually do believe that for the time being we do not have an acute problem with the rollout of 5G because of net neutrality rules. But also having said that, I still see a need for recalibration, as you mentioned, because I would support also, I mean, we have the one internet and we shouldn't have very strict rules in Europe when there is no rules at all in the US and a lot of different rules in Asia, for example. So I think it would make sense to recalibrate. Now, what do I see here specifically for Europe? One problem that we have with the current rules is, for example, we have kind of a guarantee that it is fine to roll out the network slicing, and that as such doesn't pose a problem. But the regulators will go and test every single service that we implement on those slices, and they will ultimately come to a judgment if it's justified to have something as a specialized service or not. And also, if they are positive and say, yes, it's justified, this is not a guarantee that it will be justified in 5 years. So this is a framework with a lot of uncertainty for us. I mean, we're rolling out 5G, but we have some, I mean, I'm pretty confident for a lot of the use cases that I had on my slides that they will pass the regulatory test, and they will also pass it in 5 or in 10 years. So it doesn't need to be a huge problem, but there is inherently uncertainty that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
So.
Actually, I would say that there's a need to start a debate on whether we, to what extent we should recalibrate. That there could be a call upon EuroDIG to contribute to these discussions on a policy level.
So maybe for next year we can expect a workshop organized by you on that topic?
Not? Yes.
Yeah, great. Looking forward. So, and the gentleman here in the corner, please.
Yeah, I have a question about the frequencies. I understand there are some use cases in Germany. My question is, what kind of frequencies is this the actual frequency that is used for the total rollout for 5G within Germany? Because I know in the Netherlands there are some test cases, but the frequencies that are used are not actually the actual frequency that will be allocated for 5G, because I know that the frequency that is they want to be allocated is a very high frequency, is in the gigahertz. And I know from experience, because I'm the senior frequency manager, was one of my jobs, that a lot of those frequencies are already in use, especially by the military. And I think that's going, and I don't know if that is in other countries the same way, but I think that is one of the biggest hurdles you have. Besides the auction, the money, but I think that is one of the biggest problems. Saying that, is there any contact with all the national frequency agencies in harmonize the frequency? Because I think that's a big issue, because I already know that the anti-vices are already a problem, and if the other country all use totally different frequencies, like we have with Europe and the United States, that's going to be, for my opinion, that's going to be a big problem. So is there any real contact between the national frequency agencies to harmonize the frequencies, of course, together with the regulations of the ITU for the regions?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, both in the CPT, but also especially in the RSPG, they have managed to come to some agreement to at least have some bands harmonized. But that, of course, I see the problem ahead, because there are a lot of bands that would be possible to use for 5G that are occupied now by military and other national issues. So that might be a problem. But there is a process for this at least, and so I think for the coming years, I think that's a manageable problem, I hope.
Okay, so Jonathan, please, sorry.
I don't know if I need it, I'm pretty loud.
It's just for the web stream
Oh, yeah.
listeners. Thank
Okay, I
you.
wanted to make a first comment just from the point of view of somebody who spent his life scrutinizing impact assessments. So I'm with the Regulatory Policy Committee in the UK, with RegWatch Europe, and we consult with the RSB at the Commission level. What is acknowledged among all the regulators and regulatory scrutineers, even at OECD level around the world, is that impact assessment is one thing, and we're making good progress there. Evaluation is another, and we are not making good progress there. In this case, where there are uncertainties about the impacts, it may be about the health impacts, it may be about the spectrum allocation impacts, and what was alluded to about the implicit market segmentation in hardware devices, the adoption of different kinds of licenses that may be more flexible or may allow change of use more flexibly, like SULs. In many of these cases, these uncertainties will only be resolved by experience. Not all of it can even be done in regulatory sandboxes, although that helps. So unless we acknowledge that we are making an experiment with the regulation, and we study the results and take them into account in rigorous evaluation, ex post evaluation and adaptation, we will not get the kind of acceptance of these technologies that leads to their optimal use. The second comment I wanted to make is that the 5G enthusiasts, I'll call them that, are telling us about use cases, but they are selling on two markets. They're selling on the markets of the people who will deploy these services and use these things, but they're also bidding for regulatory forbearance. And we heard quite an explicit appeal here for what might be considered rescaling, might be considered firing the starting gun in a race to the bottom. And unless we have a clear view of what markets we're competing on and where they are, that the fact that the offer and the information we're being provided is selling both in the use market and the regulatory market, I think needs to be taken into account. Finally, I wanted to make a comment entirely out of court and with no prejudice about the role of telecom firms. Telecom firms in the history of internet regulation have assumed an inordinate amount of incumbent power, regulatory power, political persuasion, influence over policy, because they provided the wires over which this stuff went. And what we hear with net neutrality is that this little thing about transporting packets is allowed to preempt all the different non-neutralities and inequalities that occur in the use place. And of course, as with the future internet, you know, the FFI 3P thing, or FI 3P, that they will attempt to preserve this incumbency position. And I'm not saying it's useless, because the relation between the regulator and the regulated sector is a useful one, and you can deliver through that regulatory traction insights back into the regulatory process and influences on the things that the telecom providers can provide downstream that may be very useful where there is no direct regulatory relationship. But it is not the relationship that is there on the tin. They're not regulating the telecom firms because they are telecom firms. It is because it gives them traction over this value chain. And if we don't acknowledge that, the system becomes corrupt. And I think that my view of ETSI and, well, of the role of telecoms in standardization and policy is that it has been corrupt and it has affected the development and deployment of these technologies. So I figured since this is an activist forum, I can step aside from my neutrality and be a bit activist. But one final thing, which is there was mention made of how these things are used. NHSX in the UK is developing ethical guidelines for the commissioning of health apps. And the point about health apps as opposed to health tech that uses machine learning and digits is that an app sits on the user's device, and it can therefore be repurposed and used for other things. And thinking through what those other things are is a much harder ethical problem than thinking how the patient-doctor relationship might be changed by a richer flow of data. So I think that 5G as an irritant or as a perturbation is a marvelous opportunity, but I wouldn't regard it solely as an opportunity to do what we do now more.
Thank you so much for some provoking thoughts. And so we'll let the whole panel feel free to answer to these questions and remarks. And then we will move into the closing segment of the session. Thank you. Sure. You want to go ahead?
I have a quick point about the importance of impact assessment, evaluation, but also we can set metrics based on which we can understand, the impacts, the full impact of any technology that we would like to deploy beyond 5G. What we're used to see is the metrics for either business, development. We see a lot of figures on market acquisition and so on, but we never actually managed to measure the impact of regulation on the technology. So that will require some work because we're not used to that vertical, convergence, and we'll probably have to work on a set of indicators that could work as pointers on how we can tweak again, the regulation to understand how to position it in the middle of all the operation work that requires a lot of attention, in terms of, the technical deployment, training the staff, to do this kind of work, preparing the market, working on the substantial, piece of work that you're used to. So I think this could be a good starting point, to have a framework based on which we can, act in the future to understand the impact of regulation or even the law sometimes on business operations specific to the deployment of emerging technologies, namely 5G and co. We have IoT and AI and blockchain and, the list goes on. But I think that could be a good starting point.
Thank you. Thomas, you want to comment? Otherwise, yeah. So with that, I'll just move into our last, to sort of a little bit rounding up this session and the policy discussions we have had, since we also want to leave a bit of room to the session conclusions. So basically, I think what we have seen here today is that new technologies such as 5G definitely brings a bit more complexity to the interplay between regulation and innovation, especially with the integration of different sectors and different verticals, as we call them. And I've heard today a lot of regulatory principles mentioned by the panelists, but also from the audience, such as the possibility of having checks and balances, a flexible framework that can be agile enough to develop, to accommodate to new technology challenges, the role of guidelines and impact assessments, or where they don't work so well. For example, a concrete example mentioned by Jonathan here in the end was regulatory sandboxes. And I want to have, as a final question to you, and that's also, I think, a bit the purpose why we are all here today and at EuroDIG. We want to provide a channel to discuss new technological developments and the impact on our different stakeholder groups. So how can we create forums or forums that answer to these new regulatory challenges? And I would really leave that question also to every one of you in the audience, since you are participating in this forum today. Thank you.
Well, as I touched upon before, I think this the whole regulatory setup needs to be, I think, redefined in a way. We now, I mean, a lot of these industries that we're now talking about have no connection to the telco regulator. I think that's a problem. We're trying to connect that dots on a national level, but I think much more need to be done. We're trying to reach out to different industries. So I think that will be our main challenge for the coming decade, and how we see these effects on 5G that we're not really involved in right now, like in particular data and privacy issues.
Sure, maybe we can just give you the microphone.
About the health records, I have something for you, so you can get that later, so that's not a problem. About the regulators, that's something they already do a lot in the European Union with that. The DYH, that's called the Digital Innovation Hub. We are setting one up here in The Hague. My name is Peter Russ from Passport. Sorry, I should introduce myself first. For the hospitals, I think the most important part is that you can disconnect metadata from patients and get the real data in. So because data is rich, but you don't want to have all the data. And the telecom providers, they can make sure that we finally get rid of all the VPNs that are there and help us to implement some more SD1. So innovation is all what it's all about.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and we'll okay with that. We'll just continue the closing round of comments. Yeah, sorry.
The question about the regulatory platforms, I did want to say one small thing, which is that we have both a positive and a negative experience in the UK. Obviously, in many countries, like in Germany with BNetzA and here with Opta, you create converged regulators to deal with a limited range of, to create with a limited range of proximate sectors that interact very strongly. With some of these others, it's much harder. So when Ofcom was formed out of the Broadcast Standards Agency and Oftel and Radio Communications Agency, it was to put all these things together. But the stovepipes persist to this day, and so some things are not well handled, even though they should be better handled. But the positive experience is maybe in the Internet Harms Bill. In the Internet Harms Bill, there is, again, a connection of regulatory domains and regulatory models, regulatory cultures, public sensitivities, and so on. So the idea was ultimately to create a special regulator to handle these things. But the interim step, the transitional step, when we learn what works and what doesn't work, is being given to Ofcom. Not because Ofcom is best placed to do it for the reasons that you say, but because it then serves as a platform for all the other regulators to come together. And that co-regulatory model, even among regulators, may be a very useful thing.
Okay, thanks. I think it's on, so yeah, just...
I just said I am very pro technology. I'm not off. That's why I'm here. It's just that just look at this. This is probably AI, isn't it? Exactly. Yes. It's AI. So it really helps us a lot. It's just that we need to be aware before, and see the consequences. That's what I want.
Okay, so awareness seems to be an important principle to stress. Thanks.
I would like to pick up on this notion of we have a very telco-focused regulation in Europe, and that might be a problem. I mean, we just had recently a European Court of Justice decision establishing that Skype Out actually is an electronic communication service, which I think it was high time and astonishing that it took so long, because obviously it is an electronic communication service, but that just shows the problems and the reluctance also of European regulators to engage with those OTTs. Why? I'm not really sure, but if we really see a value in having an internet regulation, we would have to extend it to those players, and that will require new legislation, because up to now it has been very focused on my industry, I am afraid to say, and factually, I mean, I've been a regulator in my earlier life in working with Ofcom Switzerland, and I always thought if we don't have to intervene, we shouldn't, because if the market plays out, then why touch it? So working for Deutsche Telekom in the early days, we have always tried to convince people that actual competition law is fully sufficient to deal with any kind of net neutrality problems, especially in Europe, where you already have an open network access regulation, which you didn't have in the US at the time. The US still doesn't have it and got rid of net neutrality rules as well. So basically saying we are in Europe in a more comfortable position compared to the US, that we have stability, we have rules for the internet, whereas in the US, as you have seen with net neutrality regulation, you just switch the FCC chairman and the regulation changes, which I think is not a very future-proof model either. But somehow there always seems to be an election in the US and never the time to establish net neutrality rules on a legislative basis. Not advocating they should do that, of course, but just saying the internet is so important that maybe we shouldn't leave it up to the personal composition of federal communications commissions to see what the whole economic region has as an internet governing rule there. Coming back to what I really wanted to say is there is interesting work from RCEP establishing that maybe the telcos and the access networks are not the only bottlenecks when it comes to competition, transparency, and that we should look more also into device manufacturers or into operating systems providers or into the providers of dominant online platforms, which actually do have a much bigger influence on your internet experience than your ISP, I would argue, today.
Thank you, and we're gonna close in view of time with the last comment by Hanane and Jan. Maybe just a question on this for you as representatives of two user groups. Do you think the current policy networks and forums we have are sufficient to address the regulatory concerns from your perspectives?
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I just want to comment on your comment. I'm not sure what you just said will go down well, in the policy fora when it comes to probably shifting regulation of the internet to one single authority, because that will really drag us into a track that nobody in this fora wants to, and that is more multilateralism. I think the discussion now is how to reinforce digital cooperation, and I'm sure you all heard of the high-level panel that was established by the UN Secretary General, and it just delivered a report which clearly states that the future of the policy, discourse is identifying and reinforcing the interdependence of different stakeholders on each other. And that's why I was trying to emphasize the fact that we really need to find a modality of work to be able to cooperate and to collaborate to come up with, policy solutions that would work for everybody. Now, the fact that OTT, providers are way ahead of the curve, than the telecoms, it's not competition. There is rivalry, between these two entities. And I understand that you would like to have one point of reference, you know, where you want to know this specific regulation is not going to hinder my own business interests. But it doesn't work like that anymore. We have so many stakeholders. Like we know, the internet as an infrastructure is so layered, and it doesn't work only because it's owned by a specific entity, or it could be regulated by one specific entity. So we have to be wary to the fact that this environment is so like diverse in terms of how it could be governed. But we just haven't found yet the, you know, the model, you know, based on which we can do it all together. So it's a work in progress, but it's work that requires the involvement of all the relevant stakeholders. And the relevant stakeholders they all exist, but they all work in silos. And that's what we need to avoid. We need to start, you know, working on getting everybody in the room so we understand each other better, because at the moment that's not happening. And that's why we still hear narratives like I just heard now that, you know, we need to have one single entity to regulate the internet. And I can assure you that is not going to happen, because it's just very challenging, you know, to assign that task to one entity. There were attempts, you know, in the past. If you're following the policy process, you would know that, you know, there was discussion that the ITU could take over, and that would be very convenient for governments, you know, but it's not going to work. We know now that it wouldn't have worked if the ITU wasn't like entrusted with this role. So let's keep this conversation happening. Now, please organize another workshop and, you know, about the same thing, maybe part 2 next year, so we can keep this discourse happening to break the silos, so we are more kind of merged into one, you know, fora that communicates to understand each other, and then we'll start planning the future together. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have to quickly correct, that's not what I said. I didn't call for a single entity. I called for a legislative framework which would produce in the democratic process we have here, and which would be the exact opposite of the US model, which has the competence at the FCC.
Anyway, so, and onwards to Jan for the last comment on this panel, and then we're going to close with the session messages.
Yes, I agree with a lot of things you said. The conditions are still not ideal, and we have to learn about the past discussions on these topics, the last generations. We must prevent to go that way again. And we must learn from the processes from the past. So I think it's important to create a new framework that will make it possible to speed them up and to make work more agile. And I agree with you that there are too much silos involved, and we are doing still the same things as we've done before, and that is not going to work anymore.
Thank you so much. So with that, we will close the session, but please continue to engage with us via Twitter, or stay around after the session. I'm sure the speakers on the panel might have some time, or now or later, to discuss further. So I don't know if we have contributed with a lot of solutions today. There's been maybe more question raised than suggestions, but still, I think what we can conclude is that there's a call for more agile regulatory frameworks, especially with these developments of integration of different sectors, and we need to break the silos and create better frameworks for cooperation across different sectors. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you for the session messages.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the floor. I'm Marco Lotti. I'm from the Geneva Internet Platform, and today I was the rapporteur for this session. As a participant, I would like to thank once again the speakers and the moderator for such an interesting and rich discussion. As a rapporteur, I must say it was not easy to try to find common messages and common grounds during the discussion, try to connect all the dots. I tried to summarize into 3-4 points. Apologies, any edits will be made later on any spelling mistakes. So we said that 5G is the new standard for advanced digital communications, and it promises to bring together fixed and mobile networks into one smart network. But there are still some challenges when it comes to balancing innovation that is promised by this technology and its regulation. Challenges that are on the lack of combination between the telecom and the policy world, the industry on the one hand promoting innovation and a specific business model, and on the other hand the policy world trying to address the impact of a given technology on society. Since such fully comprehensive understanding of a technology's impact on society is difficult to reach, it is important to promote and foster more informed and inclusive discussions among all the different stakeholders involved, be it telecom, be it manufacturers, be it the regulators, and so on and so forth, that should tackle both the potential of 5G for users and the private sector, and also its possible linkages with other technologies. For example, AI was mentioned. As well as it should address its limitations in terms of security, protection of data, and health concerns. So challenges also on the regulatory table and regulation per se, which means including also all different stakeholders at the regulatory tables and during the regulatory discussions. It was said not only vendors, but also the tech industry, which is one of the major players into this field, as well as paying close attention to balancing the difference and the different areas that are on the regulatory table, not only in terms of regulating competition, but also regulating security, cybersecurity, data protection, and consumer protection. Lastly, the potential of 5G technology will be easier to grasp and appreciable for the private sector more imminently, as the use case of campus networks has outlined. However, implementation challenges regarding infrastructure, be it on the coexistence of private and public networks in parallel, or the other challenges that were outlined, capacity, auction and spectrum allocations, as well as net neutrality concerns still remain to be fully addressed by the regulators. Thank you, and the full summary of the discussion will be available on the Digital Watch website this late afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for your participation. Thank you.